Hello and good day everyone. I am Hazel G. Villasper from BPED3C and we are the team Pedagogue. So our topic is all about planning a lesson and process of teaching PE. So let me define first what is planning a lesson and process of teaching PE. Lesson planning is essential to the process of teaching and learning. A teacher who is prepared well on his or her way to a successful instructional experience. The development of interesting lessons take a great deal of time and effort, as well as lesson plan is a detailed description of the instructional strategies and learning activities to be performed during the teaching and learning process. The importance of lesson planning in teaching is the basis of creating a lesson plan is the objectives of learning and giving learners a chance to discover, establish, and demonstrate what they are taught. It facilitates a learning environment that focuses on the class as a whole rather than concentrating on the teacher. All effective teachers have a plan that they consider when they deliver training. The plan may be a simple list or a more complex system that is structured and detailed. Lesson plans are essential tools that teachers develop to guide their training sessions. They are properly planned, prepared, and executed to achieve specified learning outcomes. And for the continuation of our discussion, may I call Ma'am Mialyn Manuzon to discuss her part.
So thank you, Ma'am Hazel. Before I start, I want to introduce myself first. I'm Mialyn Manuzon from BPED3C. So let's continue the discussion. Strategies for effective lesson planning. A lesson plan is the instructor roadmap of what students need to learn and how it will be done effectively during the class time. Before you plan your lesson, you will first need to identify the learning objectives for the class meeting. So then, you can design appropriate learning activities and develop strategies to obtain feedback on student learning. Steps for preparing a lesson plan. Outline learning objectives. The first step is to determine what you want students to learn and be able to do at the end of class. To help you specify your objectives for student learning. Develop the introduction now that you have your learning objectives in order of their importance. So, design the specific activities you will use to get students to understand and apply what they have learned. Because you will have a diverse body of students with different academic and personal experience. They may already be familiar with the topic. Plan the specific learning activities. Prepare several different ways of explaining the material. So, for example, real life, analogies, visual, and etc. Plan to check for understanding now that you have explained the topic and illustrate it with different examples. You need to check for students' understanding. How will you know that students are learning? Think about a specific question you can ask students in order to check for understanding. Develop a conclusion and a preview. Go over the material covered in class by summarizing the main point of the lesson. So for the continuation of our report, may I call on Miss Leana Padua to continue the lesson.
Thank you, Miss Mialin Manuson. So, good day. I am Leana Marie Q. Padua from BPED3C. So, let's proceed to the basic steps to follow. So, first is the initial preparation. So, it is the action or process of making something ready for use or service. It is all about the true planning and preparation occur outside of the school hours. They explore options, tinker with changes, and research fresh ideas in hopes that they can create the optimal learning environment. So in short, the initial preparations, ito yung nagpapatungkol sa mga plano o sa mga preparations na gagawin ng teachers on how they are going to teach effectively the lessons that the students need to learn. So the second one is the gather materials. Instructional materials are the content or information conveyed within a course. These include the lectures, readings, textbooks, multimedia components, digital learning resources including the video, audio, text, animations, and image, and other resources. So these are the one of the most important thing in teaching. So ito yung mga ginagamit sa pagtuturo para mas masupport at mas mapaganda yung bawat lessons na kailangan na ituro. So the purpose and importance of teaching materials is to make the lessons interesting, learning easy, and enable teachers to easily express concepts. So learning materials can significantly increase learning's achievement by supporting learning.
Thank you, Miss Liana Padua. And now, let us move on to the next topic. So, what is motivation phase? So, motivation phase is the process that initiates, guides, and maintain goal-oriented behaviors. It is what causes you to act, whether it is reading a book, to gain knowledge, or to study hard to get high grades. Motivation involves the biological, emotional, social, and cognitive forces that activate behavior in everyday usage. The term motivation is frequently used to describe why a person does something. It is the driving force behind human actions. Motivation does not just refer to the factors that activate behaviors. It is also involves the factors that direct and maintain this goal-directed action. So, motivation phase have different types of motivation are frequently described as being either extrinsic or intrinsic. So, extrinsic motivation are those that arise from outside of the individual and often involve rewards such as trophies, money, social recognition, or praise. Furthermore explanation, kaya gusto mo lang ma-accomplish yung isang bagay is para makakuha ng attention from others. And extrinsic motivation are those that arise from within the individual, such as doing a complicated crossword puzzle purely for the personal gratification of solving a problem. So what is the purpose of motivation phase? Number 1, help improve the efficiency of people as they work toward goals. Number 2, help people take action to achieve the desired goal. Number 3, improve overall well-being and happiness of an individual. And there are 3 major components of motivation. Number 1 is activation, number 2 is persistent, number 3, intensity. Activation involves the decision to initiate a behavior, for example, enrolling in physical education. Persistence is the continued effort toward a goal, even though obstacle may exist. An example, we were studying at the middle of pandemic in order to get our goals, dream in life. Intensity, it can be seen in the concentration and vigor that goes into pursuing a goal. Next is lesson proper or procedure. Is a reading or exercise to be studied by a pupil. In addition, dito nakapaloob yung topic between teacher and students. Then students needs to listen carefully in teacher discussion. When it comes teacher have a question, they answered. And to be clearly what is lesson proper, I have a video example, so watch this. Today our topic is all about physical education. When you hear the word physical education, what comes in your mind? Anyone? Sir, when I hear the word physical education, I think it's all about how to strengthening our mind and body to become emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically fit. Yes, That's great, Mr. Cruz. Please listen carefully, everyone, because later on, we will have our quiz. The coach has grown larger with each decade until wrestler fat she travels to the hockey field in a golf cart rattled with whistle, rocket sticks, and cleats from behind the wheel. She meets out laps like latches, and terrified they circle the school away water, not yet furious. So this the example of lesson proper. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pablo. And for the continuation of our discussion, I am Marfie GC Tabios from PPED 3C. And now I will going to discuss the last three basic steps. For the fifth step, or the activity, in order to know and to define if your student are gain knowledge, that teachers do an activity that can develop for each individual based on the lesson discussion. These activities done by the students inside the class as a part of the applying or doing the practical part of the lesson after listening to the theoretical part which is presented by the teachers. For the sixth step is summarizing space. In this part, the teacher should generalize the student by asking questions about the lesson to be able to develop more the student knowledge and their skill. For the last part, the assessment is the test for understanding. As a teacher, you will need to include assessment in your lesson plan, not only at the end but also during the lesson. By testing for understanding during the lesson, you will know that if your students are making the right connection as you are teaching.
Thank you, Ma'am Tabios. Before we start, let me introduce myself. I'm Daya Virgie Gutierrez from BPED 3C, and now we will discuss the parts of the lesson plan or the daily lesson log. This is the template where the teachers use to log parts of the daily lesson. First part is objectives. Objective provide goals to be attained, give direction for the class discussion, and call for what outcome to expect. Like what does teacher wants the student to have learned or achieved by the end of the lesson. To understand more what objective is, here is the content standard. Content standard describes the specific content that should be taught and learned. Also, it answers the question, what should student know and what student do? For example, the topic is about Zumba and its histories and its health benefits. So the objective for the lesson is for student to discuss the history of Zumba and its health benefits. In content standard, it measures the knowledge of the student in the lesson. Second is performance standard. Abilities and skills learner need to demonstrate in relation to knowledge they have learned. Present products or performance as evidence of learning or attainment of the content standard. For example, students need to demonstrate the appropriate skills through a Zumba dance routine performance. Third is the learning competencies or objectives. It describes the use of desired knowledge, skills, behaviors, and abilities perform a specific function in the school settings. Some examples include functional competencies, skills that are required to use on the daily or regular basis, such as cognitive, methodological, technological, and linguistic abilities. Next is interpersonal competencies, oral, written, and visual communication skills, as well as the ability to work effectively with diverse teams. Third is critical thinking competencies, the ability to reason effectively, use system thinking, and make judgment and decision toward solving complex problems. Second part is the content. Content of your lesson step by step. It's a list of tasks that your students will undertake. To help guide for the teaching, it is a topic or the content of the lesson. For continuation of our discussion, here is Ma'am Andrea Pajardo to discuss the learning resources.
So, thank you, Miss Gutierrez. So, I'm Andrea Fajardo from BPED3C, and now I will continue the discussion. So, we have the learning resources. So, these are the material that instructor may use to carry out instruction to facilitate the achievement of students' educational goals. So, these resources can be used by teachers as well as the student to gain more knowledge on a particular topic. So, next is the teacher's guide page. So, teacher's guide page provide clear guidance on how to teach and assess pupils. So, it includes lesson plans and are simple enough for teachers to apply them in class. Include the relevant excerpt from the textbooks with the numbers of the pages related to each specific subject. So next is the instructional materials or the learning materials. So these are the collection of materials including animate and inanimate objects and human and non-human resources that the teacher may use in teaching and learning situation to help achieve desired learning objectives. So next is the textbook. So the function of textbook is essentially to guide the teaching and learning of the curriculum in a particular subject. Against the backdrop of poor teacher context knowledge, textbooks play a fundamental role in supplementing teachers' knowledge deficit. So next is the LR portal. So on the other hand, this is a web-based catalog and repository of learning. So teaching and professional development resources. It functions as a clearinghouse. That is, it provides information about the location of resources, hard copy or soft copy, and allows users of the system to access directly digitized version of resources that are published and stored within the LR portal repository. So that's all, and please continue the discussion, Ms. Danghel.
Thank you, Miss Andrea Fajardo. For the continuation of our report, first, let me introduce myself. I'm Angelica Danghel from BPED3C, and I'm gonna discuss what is procedure and its part. The procedure details the steps and activities that teachers and learners will do during the lesson towards achievement of the lesson's objectives. The procedure describes the learning experiences that learners will go through in understanding and mastering the lesson's content. Teacher may utilize procedures that are generally recognized and accepted in their field of specialization. Will also depend on the above mentioned instructional strategies and methods that a teacher will use to teach the lesson. Changes in the procedure are allowed based on time constraints or when adjustments in teaching are needed to ensure learners' understanding. Procedure should clearly show the different parts of the lesson, including before the lesson, during the lesson, and after the lesson. Formative assessment of students' earning may be done before, during, and after a lesson and should be carried out to measure attainment of the lesson objectives. Providing assignment or homework is a form of post-lesson formative assessment. The assignment should be related to the day's lesson. The assignment should allow learners to master what was learned during the lesson. Teachers must check assignments promptly. Procedure contains parts, including A. Reviewing previous lessons or presenting the new lesson. This part connects the lesson with learners' prior knowledge. It explicitly teaches the learners how the new lesson connects to previous lessons. It also reviews and presents new lessons in a systematic manner. B. Establishing a purpose for the lesson will motivate the learner to learn the new lesson. It encourages them to ask questions about the new topic and helps establish a reason for learning the new lesson. C. Presenting examples or instances of the new lesson. Shows instances of the content and competencies. This is also where the concepts are clarified. D. Discussing new concepts and practicing new skills. Number 1. Teachers prepare good questions for this part. The teacher will listen to the answers of learners to gauge if they understood the lesson. So if not, then they reteach. If the learners have understood the lesson, the teacher shall proceed to deepening the lesson. E. Developing mastery, which leads to the third formative assessment, can be done through more individual work activities such as writing, creative ways of representing learning, dramatizing, etc. The teacher shall ask learners to demonstrate their learning through accessible activities such as quizzes, worksheets, seat work, and games. When the students demonstrate learning, then proceed to the next step. The teacher can add activities as needed until formative assessment shows that the learners are confident in their knowledge and competencies. F. Finding practical application of concepts and skills in daily living, which can develop appreciation and valuing for students' learning by bridging the lesson to daily living. This will also establish relevance in the lesson. G. Making generalizations and abstractions about the lesson. We'll conclude the lesson by asking learners good questions that will help them crystallize their learning so they can declare knowledge and demonstrate their skills. Next, evaluating learning is a way of assessing the learners and whether the learning objectives have been met. Evaluation should tap into the three types of objectives. I. Additional activities for application or remediation will be based on the formative assessments and will provide children with enrichment or remedial activities. The teacher should provide extra time for additional teaching activities to those learners demonstrating that they have difficulties with the lesson. Teachers need to ensure that the procedures of the lesson lead to the achievement of the stated objectives. The formative assessment methods to be used by the teacher should determine if the objectives of the lesson are being met. These parts should be done across the week. For the continuation of our lesson, here is Mr. Rabel Navarro to discuss his part.
Thank you, Ma'am Angelica Danghel. Before we start, let me introduce myself. I am Rabel G. Navarro from BPED 3C. Now, let us proceed to the next topic, which is the remarks and the reflection in the daily lesson log or DLL. First, I am going to discuss the remarks. So, this is a part of the DLL in which teachers shall indicate special cases including but not limited to continuation of the lesson plan to the following day in case of reteaching or lack of time, transfer of lesson to the following day in cases of class suspension, and etc. For example, the topics are the introduction to process of teaching physical education, and they can teach because of class suspension. So the remarks in there where the students will be able to have an overview about the introduction of process of teaching physical education. So now, let's proceed to the reflection. This part should be filled out right after the delivery of the lesson. Teachers are encouraged to think about their lesson, particularly the parts that went well and the parts that were weak, and write about it briefly. In the reflection, teachers can share their thoughts and feelings about their lessons, including things about the lesson that were successfully implemented, need improvement, or could be adjusted in the future. So, as in the DLL, teachers can also talk about their learners who did well in the lesson and those who need help. So, Here is the example of the reflection that will be filled by the teachers after the lesson. First is the number of learners who earned 80% in the evaluation. Next is the number of learners who required additional activities for remediation who scored below 80%. Next is the number of learners who have capped up the lesson. Next is the number of learners who continue to require remediation. And next is the teaching strategies or methods that work well and why. And lastly is the difficulties of teachers encountered that their principal or supervisor can help solve. This is the part of DLL that requires teachers to reflect on and assess their effectiveness. Reminders: flexibility is allowed. Teachers do not need to go through all 10 parts in every lesson. Teachers just need to ensure that the procedures of the lesson lead to the achievement of the stated objectives. Then, these parts should be done across the week. So, this is the end of our report about the parts of Daily Lesson Log or DLL. Thank you for listening.